So, hello everyone, and welcome to the Sustainable Fashion Podcast, the place where McGill students get together to learn more about the exciting and growing industry of sustainable fashion. Joining us today is Nora Eslander. Nora is a brand manager at Renewcell, which is a multi-award-winning textile recycling company based in Sweden. The company produces and sells Circulos, which is a branded dissolving pulp product that Renewcell makes from 100% textile waste, such as worn-out jeans and production scraps. We're very excited and grateful to have you here, Nora, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So before we get into the hard questions, we're just going to use you to learn more about some of those difficult scientific terms that we're unfamiliar with.
Of course.
So we hear a lot about dissolving pulp, and in your case, you make circulose pulp. Can you tell us what we mean when we say pulp?
Definitely, yeah. So the production chain of making textiles and clothes is really long. And the first step is of course, the raw material. So in our case, because we make viscose fibres from our material, it's usually made from wood and the forest. So you take the wood and you make it into a pulp. And this is the raw material that you use for the fibers. So it's really the first step in the production chain of textiles. It could also, if it were cotton fibers, it would be the cotton. That's the first step. And in polyester, then you make it, of course, synthetics. So in this case, when we talk about dissolving pulp, our product, it's just the first step in the production of clothes and textiles.
Thank you. That was very clear. And so another question is, one of the materials you recycle is cotton, which we learned from a lot of your website is the purest cellulose found in nature. What does pure mean?
So it's really about that we recover and we recycle this cellulose in the textile waste. And in the case of cotton, it has a very high cellulosic value. So when we bring in the textile waste, we prefer it to be a high value of cotton, so that it's a high value of cellulosic, or viscose is always also cellulose based, so we can also recycle that.
So when you break down the raw materials, you break it down into its many components, and one of those components is cellulose. So the more cellulose that raw material contains, the purer it is. Is this correct?
Yeah, because it's the cellulose that we recover and make it into new dissolving pulp. So it's also, I mean, wood, trees, everything green basically has cellulose as well. So when the pulp is made from wood, it has cellulose in it, and when it's made from textile waste, we take the cellulose and we make new material from it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So now let's get into the interesting stuff, the technology behind Renewcell's Circulos. So we know that much too few items are recycled due to the fact that until now, cotton and viscose couldn't be recycled with satisfactory quality on a large scale. So why is it that they couldn't be recycled with satisfactory quality until now? And was it the technology that was missing? And is this what you're offering that other companies don't?
It's a good question. I mean, it's always about that. Why haven't someone thought about this before, right? But in our case, it was really the founders and the scientists behind our technology who developed the process and the technology to do this. And I think, or the key component is really the chemical processing that we have, the chemical step. And this has really haven't been done before at scale. So of course, other companies are doing it as well and trying it out. But since our founders actually started Renewcell and this research about 10 years ago, we've been able to develop the company and the technology to where it is today, so that we can actually take clothes and recycle them at industrial scale, commercial scale. So yeah, it's really about the invention and then the innovative technology behind the company.
So the process of making circulose is highly similar to traditional processes from the pulp and paper industry, but you say it's been adapted to facilitate the use of cellulose textiles instead of timber as raw material. Can you first tell us why the process is similar to the pulp and paper industry, especially the paper? That's confusing to me. And what do you do to adapt these processes to make circulose? So are the machines changed, for instance?
Yeah. So our process is really based on a lot of paper and pulp technology, and that means that, of course, our products and what we sell to fiber producers is the same products made from wood and from the forest, but we make it from 100% textile waste. So the process is similar to that because of it's the same product in the end. But of course, we have to modify the steps, and especially we have a chemical step. We have a mechanical step where we shred the material so that turns into smaller pieces. And then we have this chemical step where we process the textile waste. But after that, then it's dried and pressed into sheets of Circulos, which is our product. Those kind of processes are really similar, which means that we can use the technology and the machines already existing. And I mean, in our next factory that we're building right now in Sundsvall, we're actually using an old paper mill. So we're moving into the existing paper mill. We're bringing in the steps that we need and modifying the machines there. But we can really reuse a lot of existing infrastructure, and especially we can use the knowledge and the experience from the staff who've been working with these processes for many, many years.
Makes sense. And so these sheets of circulose, they can be used to make any of these types of fibers: viscose, lyocell, acetate. And how come so many different fiber types, if this is true, how come so many different fiber types can be made from just one form of pulp?
So we make viscose fibers, or we sell to viscose fibers primarily. But I mean, the dissolving pulp can also be made into lyocell, as you said. And this is really about just fibers that are cellulosic based. So viscose and lyocell is made from this material, from our material. Whereas cotton, of course, is made from cotton, and polyester is made from plastics and so on. So it's really just about that the fibers are made from this dissolving pulp.
Okay. So the process of making circulose consists of 5 steps, which we're not going to go through here. I guess listeners can find that out in your website. But in the second step of your process, the material is processed to adjust the properties of the cellulose, such as viscosity and reactivity. Can you explain to us what viscosity and reactivity are?
I'm really impressed of your technical questions. It's really getting into those details, but I appreciate that. So viscosity and reactivity and those kind of qualities it's really technical, and it's about the quality of the pulp for the fibers producers. So they have specification of what kind of viscosity and what kind of reactivity they need from us. And those are kind of how processed the pulp is and how degraded it is measured by the viscosity and the reactivity.
Is it because once they make the fiber, it has a specific type of softness depending on?
Exactly. Yeah, it's about just having the qualities. I mean, as with everything you make, you want the raw material you bring in to have certain qualities so that it fits your process. And for us, for example, when we bring in textile waste, we make sure that it has cotton value because that's what we need. So it's just about scanning kind of the raw material.
Okay, so still staying with your process, in the third step, the wet pulp is bleached to get rid of the dye of the used clothing. So your process, you say, is environmentally friendly. Can you tell us in what ways this bleaching stage is environmentally friendly?
The chemical process and the chemical steps in our production is really we've worked a lot with optimizing it so that it's in closed loop, which means that the chemicals that are not used throughout the process, so that nothing comes out. What if something comes out, it's used again and again in a closed loop, so that nothing comes out from the factories and pollutes the environment around it. So, for example, we clean the water and so on, so that nothing is polluting or coming from the factory. So that's kind of the how we're optimizing so that the process is as sustainable as it can be.
Okay, so thank you for answering all these technical questions. We're now going to move on to the business stuff. So Renewcell works with a push-pull strategy. This is what you call it, which is basically you market towards clothing brands. You want to work with clothing brands because they're the most influential players in the value chain. And they create the demand for your direct customers, which are the fiber producers. Can you describe what Renewcell's push and pull strategy is? And in particular, I want to know, when you say working with brands to increase demand, what do you do? What does that entail exactly?
It's a really good question. So, of course, as I mentioned, and as you know, our direct customers are fiber producers, of course. They buy our pulp and they produce fibers and sell it to their customers. But what we've seen in this industry, in the fashion industry especially, is that it's really the brands and especially the consumers who are driving this force of and demand for sustainability. That's where it comes from. So the brands feel the pressure from customers to deliver more circular and recycled materials in their products. And by offering them a partnership with us and saying, if you make sure that you pull our material through your existing supply chain, then you'll have the products that are recycled and circular to present to your customers. So we partner with them in that sense, where they pull our material through their existing supply chain, and we push it to our customers, which are fiber producers. So it's really just because we see that the brands there's a willingness to change, and they want to become more sustainable, more circular. They just don't know how if technologies like ours are not visible for them.
So you basically help them by informing them on how they can implement your technology.
Exactly, but they're
Because they
really
might not
not.
know about it.
They don't even have to implement. They just have to make sure that their customers buy our material. So they can turn to their fiber producers and say, "Can you buy from Circulos? Can you buy Circulos?" Then we have a circular model for our products.
So, staying in the same vein,
sorry, I think yeah.
You offer brands and partners use of the Circulos trademark on products made with your material under a conditional royalty-free license. Can you explain to us what a conditional royalty-free license means?
So the license for Circulos is really, I mean, what we're trying to achieve with Circulos is to make sure that it's easier for the customers to make more conscious choices. So in today, there's kind of this sustainability jungle where you as a consumer, you want to become more sustainable, you want to buy better fabrics and buy better clothes, but you're not sure how, or you're not sure, they say it's sustainable, but you don't know, and so on. So what we want to do with Circulos is that we want to make it easy for a customer to walk into a store, see the hang tag of Circulos, and then they know that, of course, at least the material is made from recycled material. So it's really about creating a brand where so that the customer doesn't have to have all the responsibility for understanding and learning about the supply chain of their clothes, because that's a lot of pressure to put on a consumer. So when we launch together with a brand such as Levi's and H&M, they can tell the story of Circulos by a hang tag or by using us in their promotions, and in that way it's easier for customers to know it's recycled and a circular product.
So you mentioned your partnerships with H&M and Levi's, so we're gonna move there. So far, Renewcell has worked with big brands such as H&M and Levi's. So is Renewcell looking to work mainly with big brands, or do smaller brands have access to Circulos as well?
We're not just focusing on bigger brands. So it's been important for us to show these first launches that we can actually do this at commercial scale, because that has never been done before. And it's great to show that technologies exists on lab scale and pilot projects and so on. But it's also really important that we show that we can actually produce at a scale where people can walk into a store and buy it worldwide. And that's what we've done with H&M and Levi's. So that's been incredible for us. And Levi's even named us their most sustainable jean ever, which is amazing considering their legacy of denim and production and so on. So even if those big collaborations are really important, we of course want to work with, I mean, anyone who wants to become sustainable or are sustainable and so on, and provide them with circular material. For us, it's just a matter of getting availability so that we can sell to more customers and smaller customers as well.
So if we go into what was launched more precisely, H&M launched the blue dress containing 50% Circulos, and Levi's launched the two jeans where they replaced 20% of the cotton content with Circulos. My first question when I read this was, why only 50%? Why only 20%? Why not make the whole garment from Circulos?
And that's a good question, and I'm glad you asked it, because it's important that we push for the 100%, right? And ask those kind of questions. So in this cases, it's really about availability for us. We were still a small company. We had a very limited production. So for our fiber producers, they weren't really able to just use our material. So they had to mix it with other FSC wood pulp. But of course, when we're at the scale we want to be, and when we're scaling up, we'll be able to do it 100% as well. And hopefully then we can have 100% garments from Circulos. But it's really a matter of availability and production from our side.
Okay, so it wasn't because mixing it would make the properties better or whatever.
In the Levi's case, I mean, as you know, denim is usually made from 100% cotton and then some elaston for the stretch, but it's really a cotton product. So for us, it was so great to show that we can make this from viscose. We don't have to extract cotton to make denim. We can also blend in viscose. So that was really a great step to show that it's possible that we can have the qualities that we like in the clothes. We can have the feel and the touch that we want, but it can still be made from circular material. And this also goes to show that it's really not a big difference between our material and other wood pulp, because you can mix it and have the same feeling and the same fibers. So it was kind of a nice proof of concept for us as well. But I mean, in the long term, we of course want to have 100% Circulos as well.
So when you make viscose, what do you recycle to make the viscose? You recycle used clothing, but what that used clothing is made of what?
Cotton. So we take the cotton and we recycle it, and then we sell it to the fiber producers who make viscose, and it becomes viscose textiles. We can of course then recycle this as it is cellulosic, so we could continue to recycle it. We don't want to recycle Circulos clothes because we want them to be used much longer than this, but it's a circular system. But what we don't want is to mix in polyester or plastic or anything like that, because we can't recycle that. So we can recycle cotton and viscose, and we're mainly focusing on the cotton for now, as it has a very high cellulosic value that we need.
So you can't recycle cotton into cotton, you have to recycle cotton into viscose?
Why exactly, because cotton is made from cotton, so it's made from the cotton flower. While viscose is really a man-made fiber, so you make it from the pulp. So you can't really create the cotton from another pulp, if that makes sense. So cotton is really, I mean, we all know the cotton flower and the what that looks like, and that's not the same as the solving pulp which we make.
Okay, makes sense. See, I learned a lot from these interviews.
Cool, that's good.
So you partnered with the Danish fashion house Bestseller, and they launched their first garment made of Circulos through the brands Vero Moda and Selected. So why did Renewcell choose to work with Bestseller as opposed to some other brand? Did they reach out? Did you reach out? How did that happen?
So we're in contact with a lot of different brands, and we've been in contact with a lot of different brands throughout the years. We've chosen to focus on a few and make those partnerships valuable, and Bestseller was one of them. So we actually started a conversation long ago and developed this product. But we have more launches to come. We've also launched with a Swedish brand now, Pushpull. So there's more launches to come, and the specific reason for these brands is really just a matter of collaboration. They focused and they gave us the shot, and we can deliver to them. So it's a matter of a good collaboration and finding a way to work together from both ends.
So when you reach out to these brands, are most of them responsive? Do some brands resist? They're like, no, we don't really want to do that, or are most excited and they want that partnership?
We see a huge demand on the market from brands. I mean, I don't think there's many brands starting off today or even existing from before that doesn't have a sustainability agenda, that doesn't have sustainability goals for 10 years, 5 years, and so on. So our solution is really their only way to reach those goals. And we see that H&M, they have really ambitious goals, which is amazing, but you also have to start taking those steps now if you want to fulfill them until 2025 or 2030 and so on. So there's definitely a huge demand. I don't want to brag, but we've been privileged to have a lot of brands reach out to us. And it's amazing. For us, it's just great to see that so many brands want to do better and want to become circular. It's just a matter of understanding what we do, really. A lot of brands don't know about this process. They buy the textiles, the finished textiles, and then they make their garments. So I think it's been a learning experience for many to understand the whole supply chain and really have a look at it and see how they can change it and shift it towards more circular practices.
So you mentioned that you have a lot of demand, so you're going to have to fulfill that demand. Can you then tell us about the plant you're building at the Ortviken industrial site in Sundsvall, Sweden, and what it means for the company?
I'd love to. It's really our main focus right now. And as I said before, I mean, what's really unique about Renewcell is that we are scaling and we're doing it really fast, and we're doing it at a pace that haven't really been done before. So we're the first company to build this large facility to produce pulp from 100% textile waste, which is amazing. And the project is really proceeding, and we're going to be able to start, or we're aiming to start production next year. And we're going to be able to produce at a scale of 60,000 ton, which is really, it's difficult to grasp these kind of numbers, and it really is drop in ocean for the industry as a whole. But for us, it's a huge step up, and we're going to be able to collaborate with a lot of brands and to produce garments made from old garments at a much bigger scale. So it's really exciting. It's exciting for us as a company to grow this fast. We're having a lot of, as I mentioned, we're moving into an existing plant. So we're also rehiring a lot of staff from that plant, which is really great because they have so much knowledge and experience from this process and production. So it's really a super interesting project, and it's also an important milestone for the fashion industry to see that we can have really industrial scale production and it's 100% recycled.
Yeah, it's certainly very exciting, and I look forward to seeing all the partnerships coming up next year. So, an estimated 1.7 billion people are expected to enter the global middle class by 2030. So, this obviously means that there's going to be a huge demand, a huge increase in demand for textile fibers. Do you think that recycled fabric production will grow at a pace fast enough to meet this increased demand? And not just recycled fabric, but also new materials that are being invented? Or do you think, are you less optimistic about that? Do you think we're still going to be using traditional materials that are less sustainable?
I think we have to be optimistic, right? But I think we definitely have a long way to go. So, as I mentioned, the volumes we're aiming for next year and the coming years is really a drop in the ocean for the industry, even if we're the biggest player yet. So it says a lot about how we have to accelerate this shift. But I mean, we're optimistic. We're seeing a lot of demand from brands to find practices. We're seeing sustainably born brands who really have the whole concept of sustainability at the core of the company, and really trying to change the way we look at fashion. But at the end, it's a consumer question. So we also have to change the way we actually live, how we consume, the way we view our clothes. We can't just dispose them how we like just because we're not interested anymore. So the fast trends and so on has to kind of slow down. And hopefully everything will happen at once. So the fashion industry will slow down, and the technology will kind of keep up. So that's at least my optimistic view on things, is that I think there's great potential in really scaling these technologies being trialed right now. So not just our kind of technology, there's also for other materials and other ways of doing it. And if we can just get the financing that they need to scale, and help each other and from the industry and investments and so on, I have to say that I think we're going to be able to provide that demand, but it's going to take a lot. But I really think we're getting a good start, at least this year and the coming years.
So you mentioned that ultimately it is up to the consumer to make this transition because they're the ones buying these products. Outsourcing production to countries such as China has allowed us to make clothes very cheaply and has allowed consumers to buy very cheaply. You ship Circulos to these countries. Is making clothes from Circulos a more expensive process than the traditional way of producing clothes? If so, why? If not, also why?
So we're really aiming for Circulos to be, or it is a plug-in product, where we're just plugging in, kind of being the link between the textile waste being burnt or on landfill and new production, right? So for us, it's really about being where the market is, and the market for fiber production is in Asia. So if we want to change the way that their practices and their operations, we have to go there, right? We can't just exclude them because they'll continue their production using other raw materials. So instead, we want to be where the market is, and it's currently in China. There are fiber producers in Germany, for example, and so on, but not really at the volume that we need, and we're going to need in the future as well. Hopefully maybe that'll change, maybe we'll get closer to Sweden or and so on, but right now it's really a matter of being a plug-in product when it comes to price and when it comes to production.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing, because often you'll see people wanting to be more sustainable, but then when it comes to paying up, they're not really willing to spend a bit more.
Definitely. We don't want that to be an excuse for not being more sustainable. That's also, for example, H&M was a really important launch for us, because it shows that a lot of people are shopping at H&M and they can now choose more circular and recycled materials.
So my next question for you is, so let's talk about the competition. As more and more recycling companies emerge, the demand for used clothes will go up. So how is Renewcell planning on dealing with this competition? How will it change? I know that you want to try to get as much market share as you can, as fast as you can, but you have to anticipate that people are going to start fighting for that used clothes.
Yeah, and that's definitely a long term, looking at it long term and financially. There's definitely strategies for how to stay ahead of competition, but I mean, to be honest, right now unfortunately it's not a problem at all, because there's so much textile waste. So really we're at this nice position where we can welcome any competition, because there's this huge demand and there's a lot of textile waste to be used. So looking at it now, it's not really a problem. Unfortunately, there's so much out there. But then, of course, hopefully, this situation will change. But I think that's more long term in the future.
So you said, so then that's not a threat right now, but is Renewcell threatened by any other competitor with similar technology?
No, I wouldn't say that we're threatened, because there's too much demand really now for us to compete in that way. There's so many brands that are looking for these technologies and looking for ways to shift their production. So, I mean, I wouldn't say really that we're competing in that sense of a very narrow customer base. That's not really the case for us.
So Renewcell believes that regenerated fiber from recycled textiles could replace approximately 18% of fibers from non-recycled sources. Why 18%? Can you tell us where this number comes from? Why not more?
I'm actually not sure exactly what the source is. I mean, it's a calculated number looking at the technology development of regenerated fibers and the demand for and the growing demand for textiles. So, I'm not really sure the exact source. It's probably set somewhere, but it's definitely just a calculation and a forecast.
Okay, yeah, it was just in your annual report, and I didn't.
Then there's definitely a source for it. I just don't know it by heart.
Okay, it was a difficult question. So now let's talk about Renewcell's sustainable production. In 2019, the company commenced a project to improve water treatment in terms of capacity and efficiency at the production plant in Christenham. Can you tell us about some of these measures, how you're improving the water treatment? Yeah, I think you mentioned briefly.
Yeah, so it's really just a matter of optimizing the process always. So looking at how can we treat the water in the water treatment better, and how can we make sure that the chemicals are used in the right way, and so on. So we're always working on optimizing our process, and we have a great research and development team. And their main focus is really this, to optimize the process as much as possible as we're moving on to the next plant where we're going to scale up.
In 2020, Renewcell also purchased climate compensation corresponding to the entire company's collective Scope 3 emissions of 733 metric tons of CO2. What is climate compensation, and can you explain what this sentence meant? Because I did not understand.
Climate compensation is really about calculating your emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and then investing in a project that is forecasted or calculated to reduce this in the same amount. So kind of offsetting. But I do want to say that our aim is always to lower our emissions first. So anywhere where we can, we will try to optimize and lower our emissions. We have 100% renewable energy in our factory, and we will have that in the next factory as well. But then there's certain things you can't really go without in a company, and we've decided to calculate this, and then we invest in a project in Indonesia. If I'm not mistaken, this year was Dorian project, which is a forest in Indonesia, and Indonesia suffers from the deforestation of viscose for viscose production. So we decided to invest in a project there as a compensation for the emissions we do have. But it's also a great way to calculate your emissions so that you can see how you can reduce them.
Right, because if you have to compensate for a lot, then that takes a lot of resources.
Yes, it's going to be expensive and you don't want that either. So it's a perfect win-win situation.
So I have two questions, and then I'll open it up to the members to ask any of their own questions. So the fiber, you sell the sheets of Circulos to the fiber producers. Do they have to use a different process from what they would get if they were using another raw material, or is it the same as traditional ways of making fiber?
As I mentioned, we're really aiming to become a plug-in product so that the customers can buy it and use it in their process. I mean, it's still a new material and we're new on the market, so there's certain modifications to it, but it doesn't really require any investment from the fiber producers of their process. It's really just a plug-in.
Okay, great. Finally, how is Renewcell affected by greenwashing, and what does it do to combat this, if anything?
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I've been talking too much. I mean, the greenwashing, it's a difficult subject within the fashion industry because it's really discussed, and it's an important discussion to have always. What we want to avoid with the Renewcell is to become kind of an excuse. So we don't want brands to be able to produce more and more and more because they can only send it to us to recycle. We really want to work with the industry and with the brands to produce much less, produce much better, for the customers to use it longer and so on, resell it and everything that comes with it. But then in the end, we need the solutions for what to do with the waste that we do have. So I think that it's important to note that we really respect the hierarchy of waste and in the industry. We're not just an excuse to produce more and then send it to us. So I think that's one part of the greenwashing that we're really working with.
I want to thank you so much, Nora, for joining us and answering all our demanding questions.
No, thank you. I mean, it's so interesting that you have these engaged questions and you're really smart about it. So I'm glad that you're asking them, hopefully to other players in the industry as well, so that these are the kind of initiatives that gets the conversation going. So happy to be here and thanks for having me.